Book 1, Chapter 3. Wednesday, 7:38 p.m. Michael and Eva, again after so long. Pas ist. What a surprise. The old Greek's sunburned face widened into a smile, his gray mustache opening above his last good teeth. Pericolo, you must come in for a glass of raki and some of Adriana's mise. She would never forgive me. They dropped by the hotel, then come here. Although Zeno's small taverna was in the center of Heraklion, its facade was still countryst. Aisle covered with an arbor. A bare electric bulb hung incongruously in the middle of the porch, penetrating the dull glow of dusk now settling over the square called Placia Eleftherias, where the evening's volta was just beginning. Once the chaste promenade of eligible young women, it was now a deafening flock of motor scooters, with girls in tight jeans riding on their backs. And the watchful mothers of old were conspicuously absent. Times had indeed changed since his lay. As time here, Zeno. Vance shook his hand, then accepted his warm embrace. As he was driving, he'd been wondering what the old Greek would think about the sudden reappearance of Eva. They hadn't been here together since that last trip. Well, over a decade ago. Still pouring the meanest raki in this town? But of course, never that tequila you like, Michael. He chuckled with genuine pleasure, recalling that Vance could down his high-potency version of ouzo like a native. Ah, you know, Michael, your father would never touch it. Though he beckoned them through the Caphnaean's doorway, leading the way with a limp. The interior was dark, redolent of Greek cigarettes and Ritsina wine. Overwhelming it all were the smell of the kitchen pungent olive oil and onions and garlic and herbs, black pepper and oregano. Although lighting was minimal, around the rickety wooden tables could be seen clusters of aging Greeks drinking coffee and raki and gossiping. The white clay walls resounded with the clacks of komboloi worry beads and tavli, Greek backgammon. But then, Zeno continued, that last trip, your birthday present to him, on his retirement, do you remember, when we three were sitting at that very table there in the corner? He called for a bottle of my raki and shared a glass with me. We both knew it was our goodbye. His eyes grew misty with emotion. Yes, coming here finally with his famous son was a kind of benediction, Michael. He was passing the torch to you to continue his work. This last was uttered with a slightly censorious tone, but it quickly evaporated as he turned and bowed to Eva, then took her hand in a courtly gesture. The old Greeks in the room would have preferred no women save an obedient mate in their male sanctuary, but traditional hospitality conquered all. It is so good to see you two back together. He smiled warmly as he glanced up. Welcome once again to our humble home. She bowed back, then complimented him in turn in flawless Greek. So beautiful and so accomplished, he beamed. You still are the treasure I remember. You are a goddess. He kissed her hand. As I've told Michael before, you could well be from this island. No, even more, you could be Minoan. You bear a fine resemblance to the Parisians of the palace. Did he ever tell you? Not often enough. She flashed him her sexiest smile. But then he ever had your eye for women? Ah, the old man blushed. I have more than an eye. If I were 30 years younger, you and I, Zeno, before you drown Eva in that legendary charm, let me bring her up to date. Vance laughed. She isn't. In the presence of the man who has probably become the richest tavern owner in all of Crete. It was true. Zeno Stantopoulos had indeed become a wealthy man in many ways. His father had once farmed the land on which now stood the unearthed palace at Knossos. The handsome sum Sir Arthur Evans paid for the site was invested in bonds, which he then passed on to Zeno just before the war. Zeno had the foresight to convert them to gold and hide it in Switzerland. During the German occupation of Crete, after the war, he used it to purchase miles and miles of impoverished olive groves in the south, which he nursed back to full production. These days oil went up, oil went down, but Zeno always made a profit. His real wealth, however, was of a different kind. Zeno Stantopoulos knew everything of importance that happened on Crete. His Cafe was the island's clearinghouse for gossip and information. Don't listen to him. Madam. He winked and gestured them toward the wide table in back, near the kitchen. It was known far and wide as the place of honor, the location where Zeno Stantopoulos held court. It had also been the nerve center of the Greek resistance during the Nazi occupation, when Zeno had done his share of killing and dynamiting. The limp, however, came from the 50s, when he was imprisoned and tortured by the right-wing colonels for organizing popular resistance. Against them? Come, let us celebrate with a glass of my raki. He turned again to Eva. I should remind you, you once called it liquid fire. He clapped for Adriana, who squinted through the kitchen door, her black shawl wrapped tightly about her shoulders. When she finally recognized them, she hobbled forward, her stern Greek eyes softening into a smile. Neither of you has changed. Eva gave her a hug. You both look marvelous. Time, my friends, time, that has changed, Zeno went on. I use a cane now for long walks, the way Michael's father did his last time here. When I saw him I thought, old age must be God's vengeance on us sinners. And now it has happened to me. He smiled, with a light wink. But I will tell you a secret. Ask Adriana. I do not yet need a cane for all my exercise. He nodded affectionately in her direction. I can still make this beauty wake up in the morning singing a song. It was Vance suspected. Adriana had hinted more than once that every night with him was still a honeymoon. Ah, Michael, he sighed. I still miss seeing your beloved father on his summer trips here. Together you two inspired our soul. The ancient soul of Crete. At that point, Adriana bowed and announced she must return to the kitchen, where she was putting the final touches to her proprietary version of calamarakia, fried squid. Her peasant face hid well her peasant thoughts. Almost. Vance had known her long enough to read her dark eyes. She didn't quite know what to make of Eva's reappearance yet. Speaking passable Greek, it was true, which counted for much, but she still wore no wedding band. Adnato. Oh, Michael, don't let Adriana stuff you. Zeno watched her disappear, then turned. To your health. He clicked their small glasses together, eyes Hygian. Eyes Hygian. Vance took a sip, savoring the moment, seeing old friends again. Real friends was one of life's most exquisite pleasures. And tell me, how long will you two be visiting with us this time? Zeno's Cretan hospitality flowed unabated. Perhaps longer than the last. Have you finally decided to come? Back to stay, maybe make us famous all over again. Can't speak for Eva, but I've been asked to look in on the new German excavation down at Phaistos. A project to try and restore the palace there, the way Evans reconstruct. Idnasos. He glanced over. She was now sipping the tepid raki with the gusto she normally reserved for ice-cold Stolichnaya. Tonight, though, we're just tourists, here to see you two again. At that moment, Adriana reappeared from the kitchen bearing an enormous oak tray. With a flourish, she laid before them fried squid and goat cheese and stuffed grape leaves and octopus and wooden bowls of melanzana salata. Her baked eggplant puree flavored with garlic, onions, and herbs, not forgetting her speciality, pink terramezalata made of mullet roe and olive oil. Incidentally, we were just out at Knossos, the palace, this afternoon. Vance took a bite of calamarakia while she looked on approvingly. Ah, of course, the palace, Zeno smiled. I love it still. I probably should go more myself, if only to remember the days of my childhood during the restoration, but with all the tour buses. He chewed on a sliver of octave. As he glanced out toward the music in the street. Perhaps it should be better cared for these days, but alas, we are not as rich now as King Minos was. He shrugged and reached for a roll of dalmadakia. Still, we are not forgotten. Today, perhaps we count for little in the eyes of the world, but your book brought us fleeting fame once again. Scholars from everywhere came, hoping to prove me wrong. Vance laughed and took another sip of raki. What does it matter, ma? A friend, they came. He brightened. Even today, just to show you. Today, there was a man here, right here, who was carrying your famous work on the palace. He even, today? Vance glanced up. Had he been right? Yes, this very day, outs. Eyed in the arbor, he even sampled some of Adriana's mies. He nodded at her. I did not like him, and only our friends are welcome inside, book or no book. Was he going out to Knossos? Eva interjected suddenly, staring. To the palace, he asked about it. Why else have the book? He shrugged again, then examined the octopus bowl, searching for a plump piece. You know, Michael, I could never finish that volume of yours entirely, but your pictures of the frescoes? He paused to chew his octopus, then smoothed his gray mustache and turned again to Eva. The frescoes of the women, I love them best of all. And every now and then I see a woman here in life who looks like them. Not often, but I. Ooh, and you are one of those rare creatures, my Eva. I swear you are Minon. He turned back. Look at her, Michael. Is it not true? Zeno, Eva reached for his gnarled hand. It's not like you to forget. My people are Russian, Ember from the steppes. Ah, of course, forgive me, but you see, that only goes to prove it. He nodded conclusively. The Minons, we are told, came from Central Asia thousands of years ago. The brown-haired daughter of Minos was an all. Oriental beauty, just as you are, I'm sure of it. Look at the frescoes. Zeno, tell me. Vance reached to pour more raki into their glasses. The man you mentioned just now, was he Greek? No, he was a foreigner. He chewed thoughtfully. I've never seen anyone quite like him. He had a strange way of speaking. In truth, Michael, I did not like him at all, not a bit. What exactly did he say? It wasn't that, it was something else, I don't know. And he went. The palace. I saw him hire a taxi, that was all. But whether he went there or somewhere in the south, only God could know. He looked away. Perhaps tomorrow I could find out. Did this man have a beard? He pressed. No, the thing I most was that part of one finger was missing, curious. I focused on that. But his features were almost Asian, I would say. He paused, then turned and asked Adriana to fetch another bottle of raki. Perhaps his accent was from that part of the world. He looked back at Eva. I suppose you would have known, my marvelous Eva, my Minon queen. His eyes lingered on her a moment longer, then he rose. Enough. Now we must all have something for dinner. I'm sure you do not want to spend the rest of the night trapped here with a crippled old Greek. He disappeared into the kitchen to select the pick of the day's catch. And that smoky evening, they dined on the island's best barbounia, red mullet, which Adriana grilled with the head and served with wedges of Cretan lemon. Afterward came a dessert of grapes and soft, fresh Myzithra cheese blended with dark honey from the mountains near Esphakii. Then at the end she brought forth her own saum. Ada, a rich nectar made of pressed almonds. After more raki, Zeno was persuaded to get out his ancient bouzouki, tune it, and play and sing some traditional songs. The music grew faster and more heated, and then with only the slightest urging, Eva cleared away the tables and began to dance. Her Russian gypsy movements seemed almost Greek. When they finally broke away, the time was nearly midnight. The Volta had long since disbanded. The sky above had changed from a canopy of island stars to a spring torrent, and Michael Vance and Eva Borodin were very, very drunk. Wednesday, 11:34 p.m. You know, there was something special about us in the old days, Vance said as they weaved down a rain-washed street toward the hotel. How we used to be. All we did was eat, drink, and talk, and make love. Tonight it's 3 down and 1 to go. You're pretty smashed, darling. Eva laughed and looked him over. A girl learns to watch out for deceptive advertising. He slipped his arm around her. 11 years, and in a way, this was like it was all happening over again. I never shirk from a challenge. I'll drink to that. Her voice indicated the challenge will not be overly daunting. Do we have any? There's still that bottle of ouzo in the car. She stopped dead still, her hair plastered against her upturned face, and ran her hands down her body. Minon, that's what Zeno said. What if it's true? She turned back. What if I have the same hot blood as the queen who vamped a bull? Imagine what that would be like. As best I remember, you could probably handle it. She performed another Russian gypsy whirl in the glistening street. I want to be Minon, Michael. I want to soar through time and space. Leap over bulls, maybe even. She twirled again, drunkenly. Then why not do it? The queen's bedroom. He stopped and stared at the Galaxy Hotel, ultramodern and garish, now towering upward in the rain. The pool was closed, but the disco still blared. The hell with everything. I'm taking you back there. Tonight. Parked next to the lobby entrance was their rented Saab. He paused and looked in at the half bottle of ouzo lying on the seat, then reached and pulled her into his arms. Come on and get ready. Is that a promise? She curled around and met his lips. Time's a wastin'. He kissed her again and began searching for his keys. She was unsteadily examining the darkened interior of her purse. I think I've got an emergency candle in here. We'll use it for light, just enough. I just hope I'm not too wrecked to drive in the rain. You'd better not be. I know I am. Who cares? Let's just go for it. He was unlocking the car and helping her in, loving the feel of her body, her scent. He decided he was ready for anything and anybody, including some mysterious stranger carrying his book. It was brisk, with flares of spring lightning over the mountains. As the Saab weaved through the narrow streets leading out of town, Eva climbed up and drunkenly unlatched its sunroof to let in the rain. By the time they reached the winding country road, headlights piercing the downpour, the wind was rushing around them, wild and free. When they pulled into the parking lot of Knossos, it was deserted, and they easily discovered an opening in the guard fence. The palace lay before them. Piece of cake. He took her hand and helped her through the wire. I propose a toast right here, to the past and to the future. If I drink much more of this, I may not be around to see the future, but I'll die happy. She reached for this slippery bottle. As they moved through the abandoned central court, eerie in the rain, he could almost hear the roars of the crowd 4,000 years past, see the spotted bulls charging the nubile athletes. A heavy gust flickered her candle, adding mystery to the shadows dancing across the enigmatic women of the frescoes. Now, I really do feel Minone. She headed down the grand staircase, brandishing the light. Then she called out, her voice resounding down the maze of windy hallways. I am the queen, I am Pasiphae. Where's my white bull? Eva, you're drunk, he yelled after. I'm intoxicated, it's different. She laughed, low in her throat. I'm intoxicated by the palace, the thought of my bull, the eternal male, her voice echoed more. Know about eternal males, darling. They're like eternal females, only harder. She grinned at him, then proceeded, tracing the wide marble steps. As she floated down, carrying the candle, the moist air was scented with jasmine, alive with the music of crickets. They rounded the last curving steps, and the ornate vista of the queen's bedroom spread before them, its blue dolphins cavorting in their pastel sea. He walked over and patted the alabaster portico. Hard as this, your eternal male? This is a real test for the eternal female bottom. She threw herself down, then reached and ran a drunken readiness check across his wet thigh. I'm ready for something hard inside me. Her voice was strange, detached, and ethereal. When did you start talking like that? He loved it. Not even in the old days, when I became Minone, darling, when I became the blood relation of Queen Pasiphae. She wiggled out of her soaked brow. Dress and tossed it onto the floor. As he watched her begin to sway before the fresco of the dolphins, he had the definite feeling time was in a warp, that the flow of centuries was in reverse. Maybe Eva was none other than Pasiphae Rabaugh. And the room was perfumed and serene, perfect for a queen. Then she bent down and carefully stationed her candle on the stone. Looking up, she said, Let me have some more of that ouzo. I love being here. It's shocking and wonderful. No, this was most assuredly the modern Eva. As she moved against him, her body felt the way he remembered it. Riper now, perhaps, with a voluptuousness slightly more toward Rubens than Botticelli, but the skin of her breasts, her thighs, was oft as ever, and the dark triangle was still luxuriant, redolent with her scent. Do it, hard, like a bull. I want to know what she felt. She drew back across the stone as he drove inside her. Yes, while rain slammed against the courtyard above, the ancient, foreboding room began to engulf and rule their senses. The feel of her perfumed nipples against him was hard and urgent. It was an erotic moment outside of time. Now her head thrashed from side to side, as quivering orgasms rippled through her, starting in her groin and welling upward as she arched and flung back her hair. Then she drew up, clinging as though trying to consume him herself, in a rite of pure bacchanalian frenzy. Her breath had become labored, not gasps of pleasure, but the need of one seeking air. Eva, Eva, he suddenly caught himself thinking, you're here for release escape. I know you too well. You're not really in this room anymore. You want to be, but you're not. You're somewhere in a realm of beasts and magic and the bloodthirsty minotaur. But yet somehow he'd never felt closer. A final convulsion brought them together, and then she fell back, dazed. The candlelight flickered across the alabaster, ending ghostly apparitions against the fresco of the dolphins. Still trying to catch her breath, she reached out and seized the bottle of ouzo, drank from it thirstily, then flung herself once more against the stone. After another long moment, she pulled him to her. Michael, hold me. She snuggled into his arms. Oh, darling, just hold me. He drew her against him, and the touch of her skin was erotic beyond anything he remembered, but the palace it was intruding, arcly insinuating its presence. Now it surrounded them like a tomb, ominous as death. Finally, he turned her face up and examined her dark eyes. They were flooded with fear. Look, you've got to tell me what's going on. I want to know a real reason you're here, and I want to know it now. I'd somehow begun to hope it was for us, but that's part of it, darling, truly. She kissed him deeply on the mouth, then reached and began fishing in her purse for the battered pack of unhills, trying to regain her bravado. God, that was hot. I do love being here with you. You're stalling. Whenever you don't, you're right. She took out a cigarette, flicked her lighter, and drew a lungful of smoke. Now I see why Passy Fee was such a number. This room does something to you. Not bad for starters. She looked down, then smiled. No, darling, you're just bluffing. I remember that well enough. Plenty of time for a cigarette. Some things improve with age. He studied her beautifully disheveled form. Now more than ever he realized she was scared. God, admit, enough. Talk to me. All right. She sighed, then leaned back on the ledge of the portico. Well, to begin at the beginning, I've been seeing somebody lately. Make you a deal, he interrupted. You spare me your stories and I'll spare you mine. This doesn't really seem the moment to start swapping indiscretions. I'll bet you've got plenty to swap yourself. She looked him over. Hold on a minute. Sure, there'd been women in and out of his life. He wasn't a priest. Besides, he liked women. Darling, relax. She patted his thigh. We're both adults. You said you wanted to hear this, so for God's sake, listen. His name was Jerry Ackerman, and it started back about 9 months ago. Since he was new, he'd drop by my office now and then, to learn the ropes. What kind of ropes exactly? Really, Michael. Anyway, he wasn't exactly world-class in the boudoir, if that makes you feel any better. Though needless to say, I never told him that. Our little scene tonight would have blown his Brooklyn mind. Now does that preserve your precious male ego? He was just nice and interesting. I'll get to that. She was tracing small circles on the alabaster. Week before last, he dropped off a computer disk at my office. Said he couldn't figure it out, and it was old, maybe 2 weeks, which was unusual. Especially for satellite intercepts, which this was. Normally, we get them the same day, so I ran it through my desk station, figuring it couldn't be that big a deal. She paused nervously, then went on. Well, the first part was encoded using one of the standard Soviet encryption systems we've had cracked for years, and it had a lot of proper names. But the rest of it was just a string of numbers. No matter what I tried, I got nothing but garbage. Really? Fort Meade's football field of Cray supercomputers could crack anything. I thought so too, but this encryption was either so clever or so simple, nothing seemed to click. I couldn't do it. I even began to wonder, maybe it's not a cipher at all. Maybe it's just some obscure foreign language, so I matrixed it against some we have in the database. And love, we've got them. A zillion megabytes of memory. Serbo-Croatian, Urdu, Basque, she drew on her cigarette, sending a glow into the dark. Above them, the rain continued to pound, but I still couldn't find anything that would crack it. Doesn't sound like you. He drew her around and kissed her. Half the time you're too smart for your own good. Apparently not smart enough. She hugged him back automatically, then continued. When I told Jerry I couldn't break the encryption, he suddenly got very nervous. Said okay, then he'd just take it and try again himself. So I asked him to sign it out on my log. Just routine, and that's when he started acting strange. At first he refused, but finally he did it when I said, "It's like this, sweet buns. No ticky, no washy." By then he'd opt coming over to my place, and things had gotten a little strained at the edges, to put it mildly. So I didn't think too much about it at the time. Don't start telling me more about Michael. That was the last time anybody's saw him. He just vanished that night. There was even something in the paper. Mysterious disappearance. The apartment where he lived had been dismantled, top to bottom. Somebody must have thought he was holding out. And, well, it just so happened. I still had it in computer memory, though that's a blatant violation of security procedures. Anyway, the next day I called control and said what's with a certain file. Gave them the NCID number, and they said, "We have no record of the number," quote, they'd never heard of it. So it must have been a freelance job for somebody outside. Whoever it was must have paid Jerry, or maybe blackmailed him, into getting me to take a crack at it. Which is why it was 2 weeks old. It wasn't NSA material at all. Somebody else wanted it, and I'm known far and wide as Miss Give Her the Tough Ones. You always were the best. Right. She laughed, then reached into her purse and retrieved a 3.5-inch gray computer disk. And here it is, a complete copy. I've also got it stored on the 80 meg hard drive of my Zenith Turbo 486 laptop back at the hotel. She tossed it to him. Jerry's file, that's the good news. The bad news is, it's still encrypted. He turned it in his fingers. Welcome to the new age, he thought, when thousands of pages can be packed onto a high-density disk the size of a cassette tape. She took out a compact from her purse and uttered her nose in the light of the candle, then turned and searched the stone for her crumpled dress. He thought he heard a sound from the hallway outside, but then decided it was just more thunder. So now what? She finally found the dress and drew it loosely on, managing not to secure the bus line. I've tried and tried to crack it, but nothing seems to click. After the preamble, there's nothing on there but a long string of numbers. Whatever it is, it's not any of the standard encryption systems. She reached to take it back. Why am I telling you all this? Because we've agreed no more games. Darling, there are actually 2 reasons why I shouldn't. One is I hate to drag you into it, and the other, well, there's more. I'm waiting. Whatever's on here is part of something bigger. I know that because of the preamble, the section I can read. She pushed ahead, nervousness in her voice. Anyway, that's when I decided I had to talk to you about some of the things you ooze to work on, he inhaled. What are you talking about? There were some proper names? I don't get. In the preamble, one was Daedalus and another was Mino, so I thought, why not talk to Michael? It sounded like something that you... I don't know, maybe you could help me think. Anyway, I finally decided to take a chance and ring you. Great. Nice to finally learn exactly where I fit in. He lay silent for a moment, trying to suppress his annoyance. Fina. He told himself, be constructive. All right, tell me what you think it's all about. Well. She paused again, as though unsure. Finally, she spoke, her voice faint above the rain. Did you know the Soviet Union and Japan never surely signed a peace treaty after World War II? It's because the Soviets kept some Japanese islands, right? Seem to recall they were the Kuriles, and also the southern half of Sakhalin. Japan calls those the Northern Territories. They've refused to sign because of them. She reached over and adjusted the candle, surveying the dark around them. The gloom was almost Stygian. Well, hang on to your diplomatic pouch, because I think they're about to sign. Maybe as the first step toward I'm still not sure what. He caught his breath. How did you find out about this? Intelligence. I've been handling our intercepts, but we still haven't put together a briefing package for the president and state. It just seems so implausible nobody wants to be the one to sign off on it. Besides, nothing's settled. Among other things, the Japanese Diet would eventually have to vote to approve it, and nothing's come through diplomatic channels. It's being closely handled by somebody big and anonymous over there. Anyway, My hunch is a vote in the Diet would be a squeaker. Your average Japanese man on the street still isn't too enthusiastic about the Soviets. He leaned back to think. Given today's global realities, a deal like that had to be the tip of some gigantic iceberg. In diplomacy, there was always give and take, and you believe whatever's on this disc is somehow connected to the treaty. That's precisely what I believe, she sighed. The treaty has a secret protocol involved. It's hinted at in the intercepts, but never described. And I've got a feeling somehow that this is it. Doesn't sound like something that would delight Washington, he pondered. On the other hand, what could the U.S. do anyway? The American military is a hell of a lot more worried about losing its bases in Japan, not to mention NSA, Soviet, and Chinese listening posts, than the Japanese are about giving up our so-called protection. There's not a damned thing the U.S. could do about it. I'd guess whoever's behind this fully realizes that. She paused, letting a roll of thunder from above die away. But the protocol, nobody has any idea. Yeah, what's in it? Not even the KGB. I also know that from our intercepts. This is getting more interesting by the minute. Well, stay tuned, there's more still. As it happens, I'm also on NSA's oversight panel, the coordinating committee. We assemble briefing packages that bring together reports from all the departments, including photo intelligence from satellite surveillance. The Spy in the Sky Recon. Big Bird, KH-12, radar imaging. Well, we review all of that, sure, but think about it. The Soviets have surveillance satellites too, and P.S. Their Cosmos series can now relay down digital imagery in real time. She paused. It's classified, but put two and two together. If NSA intercepts Soviet voice and data communications, stealing pictures from their spy satellites, he knew about it. Why not? All's fair in love and war, I think the saying goes. Okay, just pretend. You dreamed it up, she sighed. Now, from here on it gets a little off the wall. So off the wall, everybody at NSA refuses to take it seriously. The committee keeps wanting to study everything, but I think time's running out. Something's going to happen any day now, but something bad. He tried to make out her eyes in the dark, wondering what she was still holding back. Michael, I shouldn't. She reached over and took another cigarette out of her purse. Anyway, the reason I wanted you here was to help me find some answers, before somebody decides to try and make me disappear too, like Jerry. She flicked at her lighter 3 times before it finally flared. Maybe he thought she had good reason to be afraid. He remembered the odd sense that afternoon that they were being watched, and then Zeno mentioning a stranger carrying his book. It was beginning to seem less and less like a coincidence. But Jesus, she went on, now they've found and I've drawn you into it. I'm really, just relax. Mainly now he wanted to calm her down. Nobody's found, don't you see? Alex just happens to call you this morning as you were on your way here to see me. Ladder yourself. That call was about me, which means he knows I've got. Her hand quavered as she dropped the lighter back into her purse. There's already been one murder. Hey, slow down. Take it easy. Novosty's never scared me, Eva. When he's tried, it's not him I'm worried about. Michael, if even a T-directorate sleaze like Alex knows, then who else? The darkened room fell silent. You'd better tell me all of it. Everything. Again he paused, thinking. He heard a sound from somewhere in the dark, but it was impossible. Nobody could have followed them here. All right. She let the words tumble out finally. Yes, we intercept all the Soviet satellite photos, just the way you thought. She exhaled, then rose and paced the room a moment. Its walls now ghostly in the candlelight. Well, lately for some strange reason their Soyuz series always seems to have a temporary malfunction whenever they pass over one certain pot on the globe, almost as though somebody were turning off their KFA 1000 high-resolution cameras. I kept noticing it, but nobody else in Photoint thought it was anything but a coincidence. Still, it got me wondering. If somebody over there is pulling a number on the KGB or the GRU, keeping them from seeing something. So I had some of our own photos of that grid sent over from the new KH-12. Where was it? Well, it wasn't necessarily where you'd think. It was the Japanese island of Hokkaido, and the high-resolution grid missing was just the northern tip. So, I went back and checked a series of KH-12 recon photos taken over the last 2 years. There's something new there now, Michael. Just this last year or so. It's been partly camouflaged, but I think it's a new runway, or launch facility, or something. And the radar maps show some funny surface irregularities, at least. You think they do? Nobody else at NSA, she looked away. But put it together. Maybe that's part of the treaty somehow, their secret protocol. Some joint, a launch facility? Eva, that's impossible. The Japanese space program is all down on Tanejishima Island, south of Tokyo. The island of Hokkaido is way up north. There's nothing up there but Holsteins and hay fields. But he thought suddenly, it's also just across from Sakhalin, the Soviet Far East. The place the party secretary who embezzled this isn't hay fields, darling, believe me. Her voice seemed to drift out and blend with the rain. Something you said this afternoon, that's what made it click. About the first man to leave the Earth and soar into space, you mean? I didn't ask for this. Oh, Christ, how did I? She paused again, uncertain. You know, I finally think I've figured out what's happening, why it's so secret, the treaty, the protocol, cutting out their own intelligence. It's partly about space, all right. Has to be, something's cooking, something they're eventually going to spring on the world like the first Sputnik. You still haven't decoded the damned thing. Okay, I'm guessing, but how's this? Somebody at the top in the USSR has decided to go for a giant gamble. To save their system, they've been forced to turn to some nutcakes in Japan who can loan them billions. And this project is part of it. The Soviets once cut a deal with Nazi Germany to buy time, so why not? The leadership needs time now desperately. And you think? Project Daedalus. That's the code name in the preamble. Think about it. You know what I believe, to get them money and technology they desperately need, the Russians have had to cave in and do the unthinkable. Form a new alliance. Michael, they're about to start rearming Japan.